This story did not take place in Florida, but is set there to protect the identities of those involved. The opinions about the poker community expressed in this story are not necessarily my own. Written and narrated by Sam Angel. All rights reserved. Losing Fast and Slow: The Lifestyle of Mediocre Poker. Chapter 1. Nice river, Jer. I pushed Jerry the $34 pot, dropped the $7 rake, and gave my thanks for the $2 tip. I'm building a wall and you're paying for it, Marvin, said Jerry as he added the winnings to his pile. This was the fourth time Jerry had used that line today, and it was only 11 a.m. The rest of the regulars at the table stared blankly, arms crossed, deciding if they had the stomach for more of the complimentary drip. It was a beautiful September mid-morning in St. Petersburg, but none of the 9 geriatrics filling my workspace had a reason to care. These men reported to the Derby Lane poker room at 8 a.m. every day they didn't have a doctor's appointment. We offered half-priced omelets, a service staff who knew their names, and a $50 high-hand bonus every 30 minutes. Even though nobody ever won over the course of a week, you could consider yourself pretty unlucky to lose all your chips before lunchtime. This was an environment in which the players could be dignified while sitting down. Cool, even. Yet nobody at my table was happy most days. They come to the game because this is just where they go. The ecosystem of our card room thrives on a culture of routine. If somebody puts out too few chips to call, that's a cue for our players to say, "No senior discount." Their dicks got hard over the chance to point out an insignificant rule, i.e., you can't change seats unless you ask the dealer for a seat change button. They play fantasy poker.
Ha! You're lucky I folded my 9-4, 'cause I'd have made 2 pair and won that pot.
And their coughing is enveloped in the ever-present hum of the room. Tables are encased by a sound lasagna of chip shuffling and dealer proclamations. I liken it to leaving the TV on for company. These players love repetition. For the comfort, yes, but mainly because making decisions was effort they didn't care to exhaust. And who would come to a poker table to make decisions anyway? What is poker? It depends who you ask. Our 30+10 tournament players might tell you it's limp folding a 1.5 big blind stack because you can feel he's got you. Our broke again, borrow again PLO degenerates might tell you it's repotting until you're all in without looking at your cards because you're due for a win. Jerry might tell you it's calling Frank's river raise with second pair, even though Jerry hasn't seen Frank bluff in over 20 years. I would tell you poker's a platform for strategists to outwork those who are too stubborn, arrogant, superstitious, or lazy to play their best game. Beautifully concealed behind luck and swings, poker is merciless at its core. Every day our patrons live the same cliches, reacting with an emotional bipolarity so striking that it necessarily overcompensates for a numb, static strategy.
God dang it! I had you before the flop.
Why are you betting with nothing? You should at least have a pair before you try to bluff me. You haven't seen the flop yet and you're raising? You don't even know what you're gonna have. Well, actually, before the flop, I was going for the flush. I didn't even want 3 of a kind. Why did I call Jack 6 off from the big blind? Look at all them callers. I'm priced in. I'll put you on it. I called on the river to bluff you. Some people see the poker table as a stage. They want to perform. The dealer flings 2 cards their way and they peek immediately. 1 player limps and 3 players fold. Now it's their turn. They set the 2 cards perfectly parallel but not quite touching, as if there was some RFID scanner to show the masses their 2-4 limit hold'em strategy. They hem and haw before painstakingly sliding the cards in one at a time, sitting back with their arms crossed from exhaustion of having to make such a close decision. One time an out-of-towner prefaced a loose call by saying, just one of the grandkids won't be getting. This froze the table for a second. The echo of realization was palpable. This money has consequences. A similar group of players come to our games to look cool. They want to tip the dealers with pageantry, show off their terminology, and reiterate before-made observations for others to agree with. I spend most of my working hours in the company of these sedentary folks in the 3rd trimester of life. If I ever get fired as a poker dealer, I could take up dominatrixing because I know what old men like. Here's a list. Telling or showing people what cards they folded. Complaining. The Soup. Discussing decent baseball or football players of the 1970s. Cars. Playing a low variance, low reward style. Getting noticed having a winning day. Retelling hand histories with the most pertinent information missing. So I've got 6-5 and the flop has a 6 and 2 high cards. So I bet, and then on the river I make 2 pair, but he had ace king. I mean, can you believe that, Bill? On the other side of the room, the PLO hangover lives on. The game is infinitely deep. Half the table have over 2,000 big blinds in their stacks. These people play poker like I played Tinder in college. Any 4 will do. Everybody uses the bright lights on their phones to distract the body's craving for sleep. They chase royal flushes on Zynga or Fantasyland on OFC while cold calling 4 bets with queen, queen, queen 6 as an afterthought. Whoever cashes out first blinks first. Whoever blinks first must return to the real world where life weighs heavily. This story, however, centers around those who faithfully play our tournaments. I would guess that the median age of our tournament player pool is 72. These players are friends with one another and their ideal poker game is one that's familiar, passive, and social. The typical player is more likely to be a racist than a raisist. Most of them have never raised a draw, but none of them have ever folded one. They didn't work for 40 years to fold 4-3 offsuit, yes, they play a lot of hands, to a full pot bet on Queen 7-6 rainbow. They find comfort in multi-way pots because those situations feel less confrontational than heads-up pots. Our tournament crowd is unabashedly superstitious, detrimentally proud, and commonly illogical. Each player is painfully aware of the reputation they've earned and will make defensive remarks when they feel insecure about losing respect. This clique of boomers in silence come to impress their peers, not by winning, but by playing the way the group has decided is proper. The tournaments we offer provide a telling tool for the study of low-stakes live poker: data. Since tournament cashes are considered jackpots, our house is required to track each buy-in and generate photocopies of our tournament winners' IDs. While players may treat tournament chips like Monopoly money, the forms we submit to the Gaming Commission present each player's results in a terribly unflattering manner. Accurately. Of the 88 players on file who've entered 50 or more of our daily tournaments, none of them have made money. A contagious ineptitude to the simplest pillars of poker strategy levels the playing field. Our 25% rake and turbo structure stifles any hopes of an outlier. Here are some examples of their typical, air quotes, strategy. 8 players limp in for 1,000 chips playing between 5 and 12 big blinds effective. No ICM implications because there are 4 tables left and only the top 6 places pay. The big blind postures for no fewer than 15 seconds before raising to 2,000. 6 players call and the button folds, explaining, "These cards aren't worth 2,000. A player limps in with jacks from the cutoff. The small blind completes and the big blind checks. The board runs out ace-king-6 rainbow, turn 8, river deuce. The player on the cutoff bets all 3 streets out of panic, finding himself all in against the small blind's ace-deuce off. He throws his cards across the felt and bitches about how it's impossible to play jacks. At the final table, 5 players remain. In a desperate attempt to make up the 4 buy-ins he dusted off earlier, a player with 5% of the chips in play proposes an even 5-way split of the prize money. A player with 60% of the chips in play agrees, not because it's a courtesy that will be repaid later, but because he's genuinely afraid of getting eliminated next and making less money than the chop guarantees. The tournament gets down to heads up. The small blind jams for 5 big blinds effective. A player folds king-queen face up in the big blind and declares, "Well, if I was chip leader, I'd have called you. But you're the big stack bully." These situations represent a few of the many strategic and mental flaws our players exhibit. 95% of the players' mistakes can be attributed to impatience, entitlement tilt, placing too much importance on absolute hand strength rather than relative hand strength, betting the middle of their range, a game theory disaster, completely lacking balance, insanely high risk aversion, and inconsistency, not based on a mixed strategy or a read, but because they're making it up as they go. So while tournaments offer our elderly patrons a cheap game, the best pocket cards for winning a tournament are Visa and MasterCard. Players rebuy to avoid humiliation and get their full dose of conversation while they have a captive audience. Now look, I'm not expecting our players to think through a complex game tree, but these people are betting, getting raised, and reacting like their entire world was just turned upside down. I mean, how narrow-minded do you have to be to think 0 actions ahead? You didn't think it was possible that you could get raised? This is what I imagine goes through their mind. Well, if I play my 9-8 suited, flop a pair and bet, I will win cash. Oh, geez, he raised? What do you got, a queen? Yeah. Yeah, that's what I put you on. Good thing I found out where I was at before I lost some serious chips. Look at this idiot who got caught bluffing. I only lose to coolers. If someone's getting my hard-earned money, they better have a pretty good hand. How come no one calls when I go all in? This is bullshit. Perhaps the most frustrating group that's at these tourneys are the poker purists, who criticize players for taking any aggressive action without the best hand. A great poker player doesn't steam when his aces are cracked by queen jack all in preflop for 70 blinds. He's grateful for the action. It's staggering to me how the old man coffee breed of poker player can reduce a stunning conduit for complex ideas into a kindergarten caliber one-dimensional muckfest. They wonder, is my hand the best hand possible? I bet. Is my hand almost the best hand possible? I check, and win a small pot. 'Cause what if they have the best hand possible? Is my hand 8 high? Well, I'll let my opponent know how lucky they got that I didn't hit. I'm such a badass. Despite their burgeoning egos, our players know they can't afford to lose money quickly and thus will only play the lowest stakes games in the room. However, the house can only keep the lights on by taking a comparatively larger cut out of smaller stakes games. Since poker is still gambling, a pro can't beat these players enough of the time to overcome the tremendous rake taken by the house. Herein lies opportunity shrouded in tragedy. These players have tons of money to lose. I can confidently assume that at least 30 players I know by name have lost $100,000 or more over their lifetime to the house without ever buying in for more than $200 at a time. There has to be a way to put this money in the hands of winning players, to keep the poker dream alive. If I can create a format with enough room for edge that great players can beat losing players for an amount to live and increase their roll on, I'll have grown the game I love. This is my purpose in poker. So what are the characteristics of such a game? 1. Thinking players must be able to beat recreational players enough of the time to overcome the house's rake. Subsection 1. One buy-in must transfer hands quickly, so as to be efficient for the advantage player on the house. 2. The buy-in must be low and unintimidating for the recreational players. 3. Recreational players must not realize that they're at a disadvantage. Subsection 1. The game must be familiar to recreational players, so that a critical mass of recreational players are willing to play in the beginning, signaling to other recreational players that this is an acceptable game to play. Subsection 2. The game should be entertaining and give recreational players something in exchange for their money, such as a bad beat story, a challenge for potential bragging rights, or something else. Of these criteria, 2 sets butt heads. The first is that the stakes are low, but the game is beatable. Generally speaking, the house needs to make a fixed amount per entry. It doesn't care if the rake is $10 out of an $11 buy-in or $10 out of a $10,000 buy-in. If the tournament consumes a set of resources, dealer time and table space, the stakes of the event don't matter. Therefore, a higher edge is needed in a low-stakes event. The advantage player must win more of the time to break even. Moreover, an extremely high edge is required in a low-stakes event for it to be worth the advantage player's time. Tournaments of the same structure last the same amount of hours regardless of the buy-in, so a winning player's hourly wage scales as the buy-in increases. Speed chess hustlers in New York City are happy to play for $5 a match because their chance of winning is so high. Those same hustlers wouldn't be caught dead offering a cheap game of Yahtzee, which, by the way, I view as essentially video poker for kids. This transitions into a second paradoxical set of requirements for the ideal poker tournament. Recreational players must be unable to discover how insurmountable their disadvantage is, yet each buy-in should be lost quickly. Professional poker is a long con, requiring hundreds of recreational players to lose thousands every day with no predetermined end. One would imagine these players would wise up when they continue to reach for their back pocket every 10 minutes. My first thought for creating a beatable poker environment was hand-selecting a crew of all-stars for a game at my apartment. With no rake, savvy poker players could unquestionably win in the long run. I brainstormed gimmicks that would win some fish over from the casino, because the absence of rake makes no difference to them. Partner poker! Winner DJ's next game. In-house masseuse for hire from 9 to midnight. Man cave, nudie calendar, BYOB. But my place isn't wheelchair accessible, and I don't have plush chairs or 14 TVs that can show Fox News and the Buccaneers game simultaneously. And what point is bum hunting low-stakes home games? I could win a couple $100 every once in a while. Sick. That's not exactly the poker dream. This game would have to exist in a card room. The infrastructure and reputation already exists. What if Derby Lane added a shot clock to force players into acting faster? More hands in a tournament translates to more edge. Plus, recreational players would play worse when they weren't able to stop and think about big spots. This definitely wouldn't hurt, but it wouldn't help enough to matter. It's not like our players care enough to tank anyway. We could change the format to play shorter handed so that winning players could get involved in more hands. Unfortunately, that would require the house to use more tables and dealers per player, so any gains in edge would be offset by an increase in rake. Maybe taking players into unfamiliar game types was the wrong approach to devise the structure I want. Beyond my thinker's block for a fruitful new game type, change would surely be unpopular with these inveterate tournament veterans. I thought of a new question. What can I do to capture the most plus EV moments of our existing tournament for as long as possible? I thought back to a 2017 WSOP vlog by Doug Polk where he defends late registrations. I'd rather win 2 BBs per 100 when the big blind is worth 1,000 than 6 BBs per 100 when the big blind is worth 50. Thinking of our current tournament structure, the old folks play their worst poker when the blinds are high enough for the average stack to have between 8 and 14 big blinds. I die a little inside every time I deal that blind level because these players are so married to their misplays, they should be known as Mrs. Plays. More generally speaking, the tournament players didn't understand push-fold poker. And why would they? Their understanding of strategy was based on a game of telephone between outdated TV poker and their peers. 2005 Mike Matusow had more influence on these players' gameplay than every all-in fold chart in the world. The players were afraid to be the outlier in their community. The problem with just light registering to the push-fold blind level was that a winning player would have to beat the rake in commuting costs through immense variance. So what is a tournament structure that combines the low variance of 100 big blind stacks with the value of abusing push-fold mistakes? The answer is that one doesn't exist. At least not yet. Getting players to a 10 BB average stack wouldn't be difficult. We can manipulate the blind increases in their starting stacks. The tricky part would be mitigating volatility, particularly after the re-entry period. Listeners from a cash game background may wonder, why does variance affect a player's expected value? And in a cash game, assuming an infinite bankroll, it essentially doesn't. In a tournament where reloading isn't an option, variance determines the expected number of hands a player has the opportunity to play at their win rate for. During the push-fold stage of a tournament, let's assume that a great player who chooses not to fold a given hand off a 10 big blind stack has a plus 0.5 BB expected value with a standard deviation of 20 big blinds. That player's risk of ruin, or likelihood to bust the tournament, is very similar to a novice player, whose expected value for the range of hands they choose to play may be minus 0.5 BB with the same standard deviation. However, as the standard deviation decreases for each of these players, the great player's chance of winning the tournament rises. This is because as the great player plays more hands before winning the tournament or losing their stack, the expected value per hand begins to compound. The Kelly criterion teaches us that without adequate volume, even theoretically optimal poker is just gambling. Sites like PokerStars allow players to purchase insurance for all-in situations, which helps reduce variance. Unfortunately, this isn't practical in a live tournament setting, as dealers need to know the complex hand equities and tournaments need to end quickly for the house to make its nut. A second idea could be to deal everyone the same cards like in duplicate bridge. The game would last a set number of orbits, where each player would play the same hands from each position against the same opposing hands. The player with the most chips after the hand limit is reached wins. Again, this could only be done in an online format, and may open Pandora's box of collusion. What about a simpler answer? Give players multiple bullets of around 20 big blinds for the same entry fee. This allows for an advantage to be bolstered by the law of averages while paying no extra rake. The tournament would take longer, which would necessitate a rake increase unless the early levels were done away with altogether. Bingo. Practically speaking, how would this work? Instead of the usual stack of chips given to entrants, with 100, 500, 1,000, and 5,000 denominations, we could give them a rack instead with 18 1,000 denomination chips and 20 100 denomination chips to total 20,000. The rack would sit on the rail and 4,000 would play at a time, plus or minus whatever they had won or lost on that bullet. Once a player had lost that bullet, they would grab another 4,000 from their rack and put it in play. I thought about allowing players to choose how many chips played at a time with a minimum of 4,000, but that enables angling and increases variance. The structure would retain the same turbo blind levels of our previous daily tournament. This permits more complex stack depth dynamics and thus more room for mistakes. For example, players who had just won multiple all-ins in a row would be forced into uncomfortable spots facing jams from short stacks with fellow deep stacks acting behind them. I wrote an IC spelling out the tournament rules and submitted it to the Gaming Commission on a Tuesday. That Friday, we received approval to spread the tournament. Our general manager told me he would tape promotional flyers around the room and requested that dealers and floors tell our players about the new tournament. This was really going to happen. Chapter 2. I opened a group chat with a couple locals who I learned poker with, Lisa and Steve. They were friends of mine from college who approached strategic games with winning intentions. Lisa worked as a consultant, designing and balancing tabletop games remotely for a German manufacturer. She's a short blonde woman with glasses and a ponytail who's as social as she is competitive. Steve worked in data analysis for Brightstar Corporation, a technology distributor in the area. He's a dirty-minded guy with a beer belly at 26 who could get a monk to laugh if he cared to. They both kept an active mind and loved a challenge. Poker was a perfect outlet for their skills and personalities, but they generally kept to home games as rake folks who enjoyed the company of smart opponents. I sent this text. I've got a proposition for both of you. Come hear me out over a poker study session. 7 p.m. tomorrow at my place? Yes! I wanted to pick your guys' brains about this idea I had. Do you think rake creates a first mover advantage? When you bet an amount that, if called, allows the house to take extra rake, you're getting the same price on your bluff, but your opponent gets a worse price on their call. From Lisa. I'm just looking forward to catching up and learning what you both have in the works. I'll bring the White Claw. From Steve. The next day I heard their voices outside before I heard my doorbell. No, see, what I'm saying is that it's a negative-sum game. We don't know whether a player should weigh their own incentives higher than their opponents. That would be Lisa. And I'm saying that two perfectly logical actors wouldn't play any game where chips are taken off the table. I don't care how good the half-price calamari is. They hadn't changed a bit. I greeted them with printouts of push-fold charts I'd found online for every position and stack depth up to 30 big blinds. They looked perplexed. Lisa broke the silence. You want to study push-fold charts? I haven't played a tournament in months. How accurate would you say your push-fold game is? I replied. Pretty close. Within 2 or 3 combos, I guess, she said. Let's test that then. I'll name a position and an effective stack size, and you both write down what range you'd be jamming and what percent of hands that equates to. Don't worry about whether jamming's the best play, I said, handing them each a pencil and a piece of blank printer paper. They both pricked up a bit. This felt more like a game now. Question 1. 17 blinds from the hijack. 2. 7 blinds under the gun. 3. 24 blinds effective from the small blind. 4. 11 blinds under the gun plus 2. 5. 2 blinds from the low jack. 6. 14 blinds from the cutoff. 7. 6 blinds from the low jack. 8. 11 blinds from the button. 9. 8 blinds under the gun plus 1. 10. 12 blinds effective from the small blind. Their scribbling stopped. These were their guesses and snap shove, a push-fold solvers, answers. If you're playing along at home, these scenarios assume no antes and a 9-handed table. Scenario 1. 17 blinds from the hijack. Steve's range. Ace-10 offsuit plus, Ace-8 suited plus, King-Queen off, King-Jack suited plus, pocket sixes plus, which Steve equated to 18% of hands. Lisa's range. Ace-Jack offsuit plus, Ace-10 suited plus, King-Queen suited, pocket nines plus, which Lisa equated to 15% of hands. Snapshove's range. Ace-Jack offsuit plus, Ace-9 suited plus, Ace-5 suited, King-Queen offsuit, King-9 suited plus, Queen-10 suited plus, Jack-10 suited, 10-9 suited, and pocket fives plus, which actually equates to 12.4% of hands. Scenario 2. 7 blinds under the gun. Steve's range. Ace-7 off plus, Ace-Deuce suited plus, King-Jack off plus, King-9 suited plus, Queen-Jack suited, pocket fours plus, which Steve equated to 22% of hands. Lisa's range. Ace-5 offsuit plus, Ace-Deuce suited plus, King-10 offsuit plus, King-9 suited plus, Queen-10 suited plus, Jack-10 suited, pocket fours plus, which she equates to 19% of hands. Snapshove's range. Ace-Jack offsuit plus, Ace-5 suited plus, King-10 suited plus, King-Queen offsuit plus, Queen-10 suited plus, Jack-10 suited, and pocket fives plus, which equates to 11.8% of hands. For the listener's sanity, I'm only going to list the percent of hands that Lisa, Steve, and Snapshove equated their ranges to. If you want to check out the ranges in full, feel free to refer to the written version of this story. Scenario 3. 24 blinds effective from the small blind. Steve, 25% of hands. Lisa, 28% of hands. Snapshove, 36.3% of hands. 11 blinds under the gun plus 2. Steve, 22% of hands. Lisa, 18% of hands. Snapshove, 10.4% of hands. 5. 2 blinds from the low jack. Steve, 52% of hands. Lisa, 45% of hands. Snapshove, 41.2% of hands. 6. 14 blinds from the cutoff. Steve, 21% of hands. Lisa, 20% of hands. Snapshove, 20.1% of hands. 7. 6 blinds from the low jack. Steve, 30% of hands. Lisa, 26% of hands. Snapshove, 22.2% of hands. 8. 11 blinds from the button. Steve, 25% of hands. Lisa, 24% of hands. Snapshove, 31% of hands. Number 9. 8 blinds from under the gun plus 1. Steve, 27% of hands. Lisa, 23% of hands. Snapshove, 12.8% of hands. And number 10. 12 blinds effective from the small blind. Steve, 32% of hands. Lisa, 35% of hands. Snapshove, 52.6% of hands. Average inaccuracy. Steve, 9.9%, about the difference between ace-jack off plus and ace-8 off plus. Lisa, 6.7%, about the difference between ace-jack off plus and ace-9 off plus. Now let's make these situations more complex, I continued. Let's imagine short or middling stacks have moved all in and you have to isolate by rejamming. However, I'll also include 1 or 2 larger stacks to consider acting after you. I'll save you, the listener, another few seconds of your life and list only their average inaccuracy. Steve, 10.5%. Lisa, 9.4%. Finally, let's go over those same situations assuming you're in the money with the given payout structure. First place, $16,084. Second, $10,427. Third, $7,803. Fourth, $5,325. Fifth, $3,890. Sixth, $2,954. Seventh, $2,352. Eighth, $1,802. Ninth, $1,466. Compared to ICMizer's independent chip model calculations, the two had these average inaccuracies. Steve, 12.6%. Lisa, 10.0%. They hadn't done as well as they predicted. To be fair to them, I took the results based on the percent of hands they estimated rather than the range of hands they gave, and their ranges were a lot closer to, quote, GTO push-fold. When I showed them their results, they were surprised. Not by their gap from equilibrium, but by the areas their leaks appeared in. Generally speaking, they had the highest deviations from the solver when they underestimated the amount to tighten up from earlier positions or overestimated the amount to tighten up with larger stack sizes. Well, this was a nice reminder to get a restraining order against turbo tournaments, Steve joked, knowing that this couldn't have been the only reason I invited them over. Are you kidding? Think of how much edge you could generate by actually knowing this shit, I said. Why bother? Lisa asked. There is no worthwhile tournament in town. I have too much self-respect to drop everything and become a circuit grinder. The most high-value tournament our state has ever seen is about to run at Derby Lane. That's why I called you here, I said. Oh, you're staking us? That's up! No, it's a $40 buy-in, I interrupted. Confusion returned to their faces. Jesus, Sam, a $40 tournament? What do you think we are, Mormon? I don't know what type of overlay you could offer that would possibly make such a turbo donkament high value, Steve said. I described the new tournament structure and they were intrigued. How long do you think it would take you to memorize how to play perfectly for a push-fold tournament? I asked. Maybe 6 to 8 hours, Lisa said. If that, Steve added. Well, great. I hope to see you both next Monday. My requests are that you don't brag about how juicy the tournament is, and that you donate whatever you make in the long run beyond your current hourly wage to a great charity. They both thought this was a splendid idea. Lisa was excited about giving to Cool Earth, an efficient organization working to prevent climate change. Steve wasn't sure what charity he wanted to support, but later chose the Against Malaria Foundation. Playing poker for a few hours a day with next to no risk, charming old folks, and making the world a better place. What's not to like? Now we had our props. It was time to lock the doors and run it, so to speak. I needed to make sure that our player pool wasn't saturated with sharks, so our promotional material couldn't imply the disparity in win rate between the best and the rest. This was the copy I devised for our flyers. All in or fold. The choice is yours! Come play our craziest tournament ever. Players can only move all in or fold. There is no middle ground. Deep stack multi-barrel. Enjoy hours of play without rebuying in our new multi-barrel format. Play one stack at a time and save the rest for later. 10 a.m. on weekdays. $40 buy-in with entries until the end of the 5th level. Offered instead of our 10 a.m. daily. It was the day of the first push-fold tournament and I was buzzing. Harold, an 86-year-old Hasidic Jew, was the first player at the podium to sign up. Harold stood a paltry 5'1", but was probably at least 5'5" before his back began to arch over his eggy head. He was a kind man when he was aware of his surroundings. I greeted him as soon as his cane ventured within 10 feet of my sign-up sheet. Mr. Manishewitz, how is the early bird special this morning?
The hash browns had a funny texture. The new waitress is a very nice young lady. She reminds me of my daughter-in-law,
he said. I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that. Are you excited for the very first all-in or fold multi-barrel deep stack? I asked.
Well, if that's the tournament this morning, then yes.
All right, that'll be $40. Here's a card for seat 5 so the flops won't be too far away. Good luck! Over the next 15 minutes, 24 more players came in for the inaugural tournament, including Lisa and Steve. I was happy to see they'd taken separate cars. Most of the entrants had asked me about how the multi-barrel element of the tournament would work. It was easier to address all the players at once, so right at 10 a.m. I made an announcement to the field. I'd like to extend a huge thank you for playing our new daily deep stack from everyone at Derby Lane. Before you start playing, I want to make sure that everybody's aware that this is an all-in or fold tournament. This means that if you put one chip over the line, the dealer will announce all in. When a player moves all in before you and you have more chips than them, you may not call. You must either re-raise all in or fold. Now, there's been some confusion as to which chips play and which chips are left in your bank on the rail. At the beginning of the tournament or any time you run out of chips, you may place 4,000 of your chips in play. You cannot put chips in or out of play at any other time. We hope you enjoy this tournament design. May all your cards be live and all your pots be monsters. Just like that, the cards were in the air. The next few hours ran smoothly, with the dealers playing the role of babysitters. The quality of play, or lack thereof, was more encouraging than I had imagined. The players' biggest leaks were the following. 1. They played way too loose in the early stages out of impatience, like calling jams with queen 10 or deuces from under the gun +2 for 20 big blinds. 2. They didn't care about their position. 3. They didn't adjust their play depending on whether they were the one jamming, calling, or overcalling. 4. They became visibly tilted and played quicker after losing a few stacks. 5. They tended to punt when they had quadrupled up or greater because they were playing their rush. 6. They knitted it up laughably when they were close to the money, folding ace-6 from the cutoff in an unraised pot with 4 big blinds. 7. They overvalued certain hands, suited connectors, their personal lucky hands, hands they'd just seen win, hands with nicknames like 9-5, the Dolly Parton, and undervalued small aces, probably because they don't understand card removal. 8. They proposed ludicrous chops of the prize money. There were some amusing quirks that came with learning a new game. In the beginning of the tournament, players would give a habitual, "Good luck, all in," whenever somebody played a hand. This got silly, quickly devolving into a pat of the table in solidarity. Eventually, the players would merely make acknowledging utterances to fulfill their cultural obligation, such as, The players enjoyed thinking up unique ways to put their chips in. It helped them express themselves in the way that bet sizes used to.
I'm all in.
All you can eat. Everything must go. 4,000 of it.
Come and get it.
Min raise.
You can't get on a roll without jam.
And most commonly, go. Funnily enough, a handful of players continued to speculate on what would have happened if players were allowed to make decisions post-flop. Oh, you'd have gone broke anyway, see, 'cause he had that snaky 2-pair and you had a straight drawer. Luckily, the entertainment factor was not lost in the slightest. Cries of surprise made our poker room feel livelier than ever. Accusations of suckouts were all in good fun, and the losses didn't feel so crushing when they were for what amounted to $4 at a time. Bust-outs would often stay for an hour plus to see more of the quick-fire action. To me, watching queens against nines run out was as interesting as generating a random number between 0 and 1 and seeing if it was above or below .19. But to our customers, it was a story of an underdog, a sweat on the turn, and a full house on the river. I found this more endearing than sad. If the game made our boomers experience genuine emotion, who was to say there was anything wrong with it? Players continued to tell each other nice hand, even in this format where the entire hand was just one decision, all in her fold. What I used to think nice hand meant was either, you played that hand well, you made a strong hand, or, congratulations. After seeing the phrase given away so cheaply in this context, I realized that nice hand actually means, I'm indirectly complimenting myself by framing this as a well-played hand by you, not a poorly played hand by me. Fuck you. Now you tell me nice hand when I win a hand. It's been 30 seconds since I last spoke, and I'm bored. Personalities came through at the table. Players fiddled with card protectors they brought from home, hoping to be invited to retell the story of what it is and where it was from. I saw everything from chess pieces to condoms to a petrified rabbit's foot. Funnily enough, the most common card protector was a silver dollar given to the player in boyhood. Silver dollars are primarily thought of as rare, sought-after objects that appreciate in value with age. Their owners subconsciously hope to share these attributes. Grubbying up the dollar with every brandish, the dozens of players who drop their piece dollar on smudged plastic playing cards look down with the satisfaction that they're investing. As if anyone would want to buy such a worn piece of history. As if the player would ever part with a medal they find so precious. Within a week of the start of our new tournament, I realized that having two good regulars take turns winning would seem suspicious at best. All of the planning began to crumble in my mind's eye. Recreational players retreating to the golf greens. Murmurs of a Florida Mike Postle. The regret of a furious cardroom owner straying from the tried and true. I was in too deep and the opportunity gaped. There was no jumping ship. Someone would fill the role our props served in due time. This was just a flawed system. But after 10 tournaments, 6 won by Lisa, 2 by Steve, a near miracle bloomed. Interest in our tournament grew. In the archives of gambling lore, no story is as infamous as that of the Monte Carlo casino in Monaco. Legend, as it was told to me, is that ultra-wealthy French gamblers played roulette with supreme fearlessness. Their presumed guile was attributed to a strategy known as the martingale that had never failed them. The strategy simply dictated that a player double their previous wager if they had lost the previous spin. If they lost the next spin, double the doubled bet, and so on. Once they won a bet, they would recoup all of their losses. These patrons were starting with hefty bets, around $150 a spin in today's dollars, but that was nothing compared to their limitless fortune. The players arrived for gambling and drinking like any other night, but a group found themselves perplexed after betting on black incorrectly 11 spins in a row. Friends and nobles were summoned to the table for the gambling opportunity of a lifetime. No roulette table had landed on the same color 12 times in a row. The next spin was guaranteed to land black.
26. Red.
Murmurs grew feverishly. Esteemed public figures aggressively jostled towards the table to place bets. 13 times in a row was unheard of.
22. Red.
The original players were beside themselves, borrowing money, escrowing the marriage of their children. The casino floor made Wall Street look like the DMV. Gamblers pleading for marked up shares of players' bets with no room on the table for their own. The wheel landed on red 4 more spins in a row. A country went broke. I mention this bad beat of historic proportions because fallacies and independent probability are what saved my plan. The players in our tournament genuinely believed that each prize Lisa won made it exponentially tougher for her to win the following day. The aristocrats turned squatters of centuries past may curse their unfortunate 130,072 to 1 shot, but the truly life-changing money was only lost on a 50-50 spin. Well, 18 to 19, but who's counting? Our crowd grew alongside an anticipation for reversion. It was a mix of entitlement and excitement. Our rec players salivated thinking about how superior they'd seem to their peers once their damn ace-jack finally held up. I thought about buying a bracelet with "First to break the dynasty at Derby Lane" engraved as extra incentive, but that seemed like putting a hat on a hat. Eventually, our 3-table S&G became a 10-table MTT. It was nice to be able to pay the entire final table, since it hung a bigger carrot in front of the, quote, proverbial donkey's nose, but we began to encounter diseconomies of scale. The tournament doubled in length, required the room to hire new and less experienced dealers, and worst yet began to suck players away from the much more lucrative live games. I can understand why. Who would want to go back to set mining and raise folding when you just sweated 35 runouts and lost 24 with them? Nothing compares to the drama of our one-of-a-kind event. So where do we go from here? We could always cap the number of entries or share the idea with neighboring rooms, but that almost feels like accepting defeat for an idea that was too good. If you think about it, though, the issue isn't the number of entrants but the space they take up. If there was a way to fit more players at a table, get them out the door quicker, or make the cards deal themselves, we may be able to support the extra interest in our game. What if I told you there was a way to do all three? Chapter 3. I logged on to Ignition for the first time since moving to Florida. Instead of sitting 6 empty mid-stakes heads-up tables, I clicked the Support button. I titled my ticket, Licensing Push-Fold Tournament Software. 3 hours after sending my message, I saw an email notification from a customer relations representative named Dale. It read, Pokerhauntus. Thank you for your inquiry. Our development team would be happy to permit you access to our technology conditional upon 2 criteria. 1. You and your room owner's signature of a non-compete form relating to all real money online poker. And 2. Joining our team as an affiliate. This would include branding your gaming devices with our logo and directing interested players via the link below so we can monitor referral traffic. We wish you luck in your efforts to recreate our product in a live atmosphere. Regards, Dale. Just like that, everything fell into place. I was granted funding for 75 Pink Fong Baby Shark tablets at $14 each, and got to work as soon as the shipment came in. It took nearly all of the device's memory to install our new program, and I couldn't wait to set them up one by one. Though my eyes were open, I didn't see a finger sliding across a screen. I saw the efficiency of online poker embrace the game selection, sociability, and kitten softness of live play. I slept on the break room couch and nervously awaited the reaction of our Tuesday morning tournament crowd. Good morning, players. We are pleased to announce a new system to improve our daily tournament. Our new partner, Ignition Casino, has provided a way for you to play with more of your friends, see 10 times as many hands per blind level, and eat right at the table without worrying about all the germs on your chips and cards. Starting today, our push-fold tournament will be played on the electronic tablets set on tables 7 through 17. We will play 12-handed, but no draw cards are necessary. Instead, feel free to sit next to whoever you'd like, but remember there's only one player to a hand. Your hole cards will only be visible when your finger is touching the screen, and the dealers will be at the tables to maintain game integrity. If you have any questions about the interface, please ask a dealer and they'll assist you. You're welcome to grab a rack of tournament chips on your way to the table if you like riffling something physical while you think. Are there any questions about these modifications? What's an interface? Ken asked. The screen. Your cards plus the fold and all-in buttons, I answered. What happens if we need to go to the bathroom? Carol asked. The same thing as before. You'll be dealt out. After 30 seconds of inactivity, the computer will auto-fold your hands, I said. How do we know it ain't rigged? Ken asked. The software has passed all the industry tests for random number generation. The hands are also reviewed by our surveillance team to ensure everything is above board. I can explain specifics with you individually, I replied. This change markedly disconcerted our players. It's funny how dramatically changing the rules of a game caused our players no grief, yet shifting play to an online platform seemed to threaten their way of life. Players murmured to each other, complaining no doubt, as they tentatively wandered, hobbled, or wheeled their way to the tables. The tournament started 30 minutes later after dealers showed the players the features of our new setup. Most of this time was filled by dealers reminding players it was their turn, because the demo didn't time them out. What an amazing situation this was. This change actually widened the skill gap for a few reasons. First and foremost, old folks are just bad with technology. They'll misclick, fat finger, time out talking to their neighbor, or play worse due to anxiety. Playing 12-handed exploits the recreational player's impatience. It also creates a bigger final table for people to knit it up at, and fewer tables to get to that final table. No EV is lost through a lack of reads. The props are using a memorized chart anyway. The tournament was over by 12:40, a full 2 hours earlier than it usually lasted. Steve took down a first prize of $1,380, and Lisa grabbed third for $610. Our dealers were in dreamland. No wrist or back pain from poker posture, and an army of players looking for a live game to pass the time they usually spent zoning out in the tournament. Some of the people who came for our tournaments would drive around from casino to casino all day long playing the local tournament circuit. I realized that one reason these players preferred tournaments to cash games was that tournaments ended. There was an order that mothered players into a routine, a schedule that guaranteed players wouldn't over-gamble, but would have a place to be. The automation of this tournament gave players a tragic surplus of time. The TVs and free soft drinks beckoned players to the cash tables where their loose passivity was savagely punished by our rake. Tomorrow we'd get to do it all over again. Make no mistake, there were growing pains with this change. Coffee was spilled on the machines, and there was a time a tablet wasn't charged and died partway through the tournament. But management took one look at the bottom line, and it was clear that our internet gambling cafe was the new status quo. Over the next 7 weeks, our payout data displayed a clear picture as to how each player was performing. The worst players would cash about 4% of the time with a negative 83% ROI. The median player cashed in 7% of our tournaments with a negative 59% ROI. Lisa and Steve cashed 46% of the time with a 510% ROI. The two crushers had intangible bounties over their heads, but diffused any animosity by showing interest in their opponent's ideas and memories. There's a poker axiom that states, when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience leaves with money, and the man with money leaves with experience. This was similar to the exchange between the tournament's winners and losers. Lisa and Steve collected a handsome reward for their time, while the other players enjoyed the sharp wit of an entertainer they couldn't otherwise get the time of day from. Eventually, however, frustration grew. Players felt powerless to their crippling bad luck. They weren't going to stop because in their mind the money wasn't lost until they'd quit. One day, a mid-30s burnout named Chuck began to berate a curmudgeonly old man who'd just beat him king-jack over ace-king. You don't even know how bad that is. I mean, I've got such a good hand, and you don't even care. I was summoned over to break up the Helmuthian altercation. Chuck, you know we have a strict policy here that players can't verbally abuse other players, I told him firmly. It's just not fair. He gets away with this shit because he's lucky, and I have to wait so long to get another hand this good. I just want to write out the way I play my game and have him write out how he plays, and then have the better player win, Chuck complained. I froze. Oh my God, that's brilliant. What if we could do away with the dog and pony show of playing individual hands and just bet on entire strategies? That would achieve maximum efficiency. The better players would always win, and there would be literally no expenses. And why wouldn't everyone participate? These players are some of the proudest, most stubborn people I know. They've been playing the same game for decades, and in their mind, it hasn't evolved in the slightest. If I were asked to group our tournament crowd by a shared trait, I wouldn't describe them as poker enthusiasts, gamblers, elders, or socialites. I would describe them as overconfident. Well, we're actually working on that, I said. Really? Chuck asked, disbelieving. Then he continued. Well, good. I can't wait to see the judges laugh at terrible moves like his and finally let me win the tournament. The jam was for 6 big blinds, and the formation was cutoff versus big blind. To say the call was standard would be an understatement. Obviously, our house couldn't have judges arbitrarily deciding that one strategy is better than another. But that doesn't mean we couldn't pit 2 strategies against one another. We would just have to use a system that's fully devoid of bias. High-volume simulation. Players could spend a few minutes entering their proposed ranges on each stack depth, 0.5 to 50 big blinds, for every push fold, call fold, overcall fold, etc. option at each position on their tablets. Then players could watch the tournament play out on a TV for a few minutes. After the tournament ended and the winners were awarded their prize money, players could enter another tournament or buy multiple entries to multiple simulated tournaments. We could even offer cheaper tournament buy-ins to draw an even larger crowd. Players could save their strategy to the system so that they wouldn't have to spend time inputting all of their ranges every morning. They could tinker with strategies after they watched the way the tournament played out, but ultimately they'd just be making it up as they went. Speculative, emotionally invested, rooting for favorable runouts as if the cards were racehorses. And this is only the beginning. Who's to say they need to actually watch the poker play out? Each simulation could be like a pull of a slot machine, spitting out a winner instantly with hand history saved on a database for gaming legitimacy. This must be the future of poker. Would this product be any more ethical if we offered a space for the players to socialize? Lick their wounds in a bad beat lounge or tell stories at vacant tables of how poker used to be? Orwellian? Maybe. But what right do retirees have to dwindle away their pensions on poker when there are kids in their city who go to sleep hungry? Is there a more expensive or less fulfilling pastime than bad regdom? There are cheaper and more intellectually provocative hobbies. Knitting comes to mind. But I don't want to demonize old folks for going to one of the only places that accepts them. As people age into their twilight years, their ability to productively contribute dwindles. Old folks' sense of purpose is an afterthought of our culture and the families they belong to. From working around them, it's clear they want to share their knowledge and experiences, be remembered fondly, and enjoy friendships in a setting that is familiar and comfortable. This community of elders would thrive in roles where they could be the expert. These seniors could provide mentorship to misguided youths, the mentally disabled, or adults off the beaten path. Imagine a hotline where 65-plus-year-olds gave life advice to troubled call-ins. An operator could refer a caller to a senior with specialized experience for the nature of their question, so that rather than feeling important, our players could truly be important. And if this was the status quo, I have no doubts that our players would enjoy helping people through this outlet. But the cultural and social pressures of these players' bubble dictate that they gamble to feel included. Change is a slow process, and I thought it better to allow nature to take its course. Chapter 4. James Gonzalez's was the only CV I needed to read. He had been a contractor in the development of simple post-flop, and clearly had the chops to create a program that accepts players' ranges and auto-battles them. The room's owner was more than willing to go along with my second harebrained idea, given the success of the first, and we commissioned payment for a range versus range dream machine. In a way, this format actually got players closer to poker strategy than they'd ever been. But in a much realer sense, leaks in their play had never been more disguised. The menu to input ranges was designed to look as simple or complex as the user's strategy. The screen displayed a hand matrix of all combinations, and players could select the holdings they would like to move all in with. This was the default option. Then players could select a variation tab and input a separate range for more specific circumstances, including position, stack sizes, overjamming facing one or multiple opponents, bullet number, and being in or near the money. With such a diversity of options to tinker with, players wouldn't run out of punts to make. With easy access to a one-size-fits-all strategy, gamblers could throw together a default range and run it. The graphics were sharp. We used a 4-color deck, showed virtual chips accumulating next to players' avatars, and displayed their remaining re-entries as 8-bit bullets like hearts from The Legend of Zelda. The owner of the room brought the dusty projector from his in-home theater, and it wasn't expensive to buy a huge white drapery to broadcast the action large enough for our players to see from 20 feet away. The idea was for players to arrive early to set how they wanted our simulator to play for them, then enjoy a beer with friends while they sweated the runouts. After the tournament ended, the winners collected their money, and then the room would have 15 minutes to make any adjustments they wanted before the tournament ran again. We would continue to spread the tournament every 30 minutes until we didn't have at least 2 people willing to enter. We also offered a room upstairs for players interested in buying in for multiple tournaments concurrently. This computer projected onto a screen split into as many segments as were tournaments running. The private area containing our super simulator was affectionately named the Heads Up for Rolls room, because stubborn gamblers could lose fortunes at low stakes. This mammoth quantity of concurrent hands allowed our house to advertise penny poker while retaining a healthy rake. When I came into work the next day, I geared up to address our crowd of tournament customers for a third and final time. May I have everybody's attention? The positive response we've gotten to going digital has been overwhelming, and I can't express how much the staff of this house appreciates your patronage. We've been developing a new way to play our multi-barrel deep stack that I'm proud to unveil. Beginning tomorrow, we are making changes to our format that will allow you to make passive income playing poker. This isn't staking. This is a process by which you can play your own game without lifting a finger. Through advances in automation, our system will be able to register a series of inputs you provide and will act for you. Hands will play out lightning fast, and you can sit back and watch the fireworks. We anticipate that each tournament will be 15 minutes of non-stop action, and then you'll be able to fine-tune your strategy before entering again at the top of the half hour. Since the tournaments go by quicker, we're pleased to offer a lower buy-in of $20 for the same service, so that entering multiple tournaments in a day is affordable, regardless of how the cards fall. Additionally, players interested in seeing their game play out in even more tournaments can play up to 128 tournaments concurrently for whatever stakes the entrants agree upon, so long as each player has the money to buy in up front. After you've watched each simulation run its course, our poker cage will pay you out for all the cashes you amassed. This was suggested by one of the tournament regulars, so I would like to thank them for their engagement. Poker Hall of Famer Tom McAvoy once said, "No limit hold'em is hours of boredom followed by moments of sheer terror," and I'm sure we can all relate to that on some level. We hope this makes our tournaments feel more leisurely, exciting, and social. Again, please arrive by 9:30 tomorrow morning if you plan to play our new tournament variant, Strategy Clash Simulator. Enjoy our last ever manual action daily tournament, and we hope to see all of you tomorrow for as many tournaments as you can make. The following day, the now standard droves of players crammed our parking lot. Most of them didn't understand what had changed, so our dealers played the role of flight attendants. Players got creative with their avatars/screen name and began plugging away. Some players labored over each scenario as if they were in a beautiful mind. In reality, all but 2 players were completely making it up on the fly. For as inaccurate as our players' push-fold games were when they were taking it one hand at a time, at least they could better visualize the situation when they were in it. Now, in total sandbox mode, numbers blended together and gut feelings dominated any critical thought. I had told Lisa and Steve to work through the input screen at the speed of the other players so it didn't seem like they'd completely memorized their ranges. I had to remind all of our enraptured strategists that 1 player to a hand meant they couldn't share their strategies with their peers during the input stage. Some players couldn't finish setting their lineup, as it was later called, until after the start of the tournament, but they were happy to join a second flight of latecomers and re-entrants at 10:30 to play all over again. Here were the entries for each strategy simulator tournament on our first day spreading it. 10 a.m., 83 entrants, $415 in rake. 10:30 a.m., 109 entrants, $545 in rake. 11 a.m., 98 entrants, $490 in rake. 11:30 a.m., 76 entrants, $380 in rake. 12 p.m., 47 entrants, $235 in rake. 12:30 p.m., 40 entrants, $200 in rake. 1 p.m., 29 entrants, $145 in rake. 1:30 p.m., 25 entrants, $125 in rake. 2 p.m., 19 entrants, $95 in rake. 2:30 p.m., 16 entrants, $80 in rake. 3 p.m., 10 entrants, $50 in rake. 3:30 p.m., 7 entrants, $35 in rake. 4 p.m., did not run. Total, $2,795 in rake. After hearing about the Maiden Hall, our room's owner wanted to meet with me about how to best leverage our opportunity. I entered his office to a round of applause. Sam, do you know what the most we've ever profited from a tournament was before the new tournament you brought? He asked. Maybe in the neighborhood of $1,000, I guessed. After paying our dealers and floors $150, and it's pretty rare that they made money at all. The main reason to run them was to get players in the door for cash games. The new tournament you put together 2 months ago reduced our expenses by 40%, and the tournament this morning, well, it's the best thing that's ever happened to this place, he said. Thanks, George. I'm happy to give something back to our poker room after you've given me such a good job these last few years, I said. I want this fast and labor-free tournament to prosper for years to come. What can we do to keep players coming back every day? He asked. From what I saw, the reason that participation declined throughout the day is that players ran out of money. We are in the enviable position of monopolizing a service that costs nothing to provide. It's difficult to guess our customers' elasticity with regards to rake, but it seems likely that certain thresholds will capture new markets. If we allowed buy-ins as low as $5 for our super simulator, we could attract low-roller gamblers who view it as a long-lasting degenerate spin of video poker. We could, however, allow reservations to be made for private parties who can commit to playing higher stakes, I said. And what about the main game that only simulates one tournament at a time? He queried. I think $20 is a great place for that to stay. However, we have to lower the rake, and here's why. When enough of the entry fee circulates around the player pool, it's more difficult for losing players to tell that they're losing. It also helps people making income through pensions or Social Security tread water until their next payday. If this is going to be sustainable long-term, we need it to be a hobby that our players can afford. These players are creatures of habit, and if they can't do something every day, they probably won't do it at all. As this tournament grows into a cheap thrill for social butterflies who don't know the first thing about poker, we're going to need a critical mass of players to keep the prize pool juicy. My recommendation is that we take a $2 rake. This way, the median skilled player who plays for 5 hours a day only loses $20 on average, and the worst players probably only lose around $60 on average, both of which are affordable. If the rake increases to $5 and the worst players lose $150 a day, they won't be able to play. Then we run into the same issues that plague private insurance companies: adverse selection. If the weakest players can't afford to play, then the next worst players will start to lose at the same rates that the dropouts experienced, pricing out the best of the worst. This process will continue to eat away at our player pool until there's no game at all. Would you rather have a revenue of $1,000 a day in perpetuity, or $2,500 a day for a few weeks at most? I asked. George contemplated for a few seconds. You know, I've always liked you. It seems like you've thought a lot about this and that you've got the best interests of the room in mind. Why don't you get right to marketing our rake decreases? I know that'll be a big draw to poker players from all over, he said. Sure thing, I said, knowing full well that I would do everything I could to keep other pros away from this game. We had already raised $18,000 for Lisa and Steve's charities of choice, and today marked a turning point where their earnings could become uncapped. 15 hours later, 91 players were back for a splendid day of drinking, shouting, scheming, and buying in a handful of times. I posted notices of rake decreases as a thank you for customer loyalty everywhere around the room, but I didn't make any announcements on our social media accounts because that would likely reach a much more competent type of player. The tournament ran from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Players had learned to bring more money with them. There was even a resurgence at 8 p.m. when a group of happy-go-lucky drinkers wanted to try out the format a couple times. The house made $1,266 from the tournament, and Lisa and Steve profited $1,921. Best of all, they could now do their work while the simulations ran, because they didn't need to adjust their strategies whatsoever. It was strange to watch these upper-middle-class retirees stay entertained by something so repetitive. It felt like a baby laughing at a mobile suspended above their crib. With the props on the mobile being hands like ace-10 or pocket fours. And these people aren't stupid. There's just some disconnect between their middle manager previous self and their poker potato current self. Critically, the program didn't expose a player's hole cards until showdown, a jam and a call. This kept each player's decisions secret for the most part, with mere glimpses of hands and rarely at the thresholds of a player's range. I witnessed a resurgence of the type of information concealment that dominated poker culture in Dwan and Ivy's prime. Egos controlled the game type because players couldn't just mimic what they saw pros do on TV, since no self-respecting group of pros would play such a clearly solved game. Each player believed that they possessed the special sauce to take down the next tournament. Moreover, players tended to adjust in the wrong direction when they changed their strategy. They would remember the hand that they busted the tournament on and think, I need to make sure I'm ahead when the money goes in next time. This led them to enter an even tighter strategy on shorter stack depths. The metagame of popular strategies seesawed on an hour-by-hour basis. It just took one aggressive strategy running hot for a tournament to convert a horde of unsure trend followers to overcompensate, then quickly lose it all back. There was actually a time where a player accidentally highlighted 10-5 offsuit in his default strategy and won all 4 pots that 10-5 off was involved in. Some players legitimately debated the merits of a hand that was double-suited and covered all straights. Certain players would track the performance of certain holdings with tally marks on a newspaper to scout whether they should buff up or slim down certain ranges. It felt as though our bubble of a card room was lost in time. Perfection was a Google search and a solver download away, yet these players were scribbling out analog data like some sort of middle school lab project. The ridiculous situation showed a lack of critical thinking, an inability to ask the right questions, and a narrow-minded approach that reinvented the wheel. For particularly high-volume sims in the heads-up for rolls room, we sped up the playback since it wasn't possible for anyone to watch all of the tables concurrently. Instead, players could review the tournament to confirm the machine was playing how they ordered it to, or, and this is a crazy thought, try and learn from what winning players were doing. But the most attention any player actually paid to poker at this point was ordering poker-themed items off our menu.
Hey, hun, could I get a grinder's grinder with a dry-side pop martini? If you're quick, there may be $1 in it for you.
Winks. Chapter 5. About half of our original regulars stopped coming to Derby Lane. The place was swamped with groups of employees looking for a quick sweat over their lunch break, bingo enthusiasts drawn by brighter lights, bored kids looking for something Snapchatable, and others, so most people didn't notice the absence of certain loyal customers. But I did. I saw them sip a cranberry juice alone while the rowdy room cackled from entertainment. They tried to make their dumb old jokes to the new wave of gamblers who watched the tournament nearby, but were met by annoyed put-downs. The friendships and presence they'd built for decades were rendered meaningless. Even casinos outgrow you at some point. This all started 14 months ago. Now the life has left our tournaments. A seemingly impossible reality eased into existence. Our tournament players became jaded. Playing poker all day long can keep a person engaged, but watching poker all day certainly doesn't. Many of the players who felt powerless to a poor run of luck in the main MTT tried their luck in the heads-up for rolls room. This was always short-lived. Lisa and Steve took turns playing the role of end boss, battering the player as far into financial ruin as that player's hubris would allow. The greatest single-day win our humble poker room had ever witnessed was a 5-hour battle between a traveling businessman and Steve. They met in the bar and got hostile quickly, the businessman taking shots at Steve's Semitic heritage. Steve roasting the daylights out of the businessman's toupee. The logical resolution was for the pair to head upstairs and simulate 128 tables at $5 a table. When Steve won 81 of those tables, the businessman spiraled down the rabbit hole of loss chasing. They immediately rematched for $10 a table without either player adjusting their strategy. This time, Steve won 87 of the 128 tables. They continued raising the stakes until they hit $100 a table, buying in for a collective $25,600. This game was run 3 times, winning Steve $21,800 and giving the house a cool $1,152 for its troubles. Rake in these games was capped at $3 a table. Then the businessman said he would play again only if Steve was willing to play for $500 a table. What he didn't realize was that Steve called people's bluffs for a living. Steve didn't have $64,000 on him, but another buddy of mine, Josh, owned 10 Bitcoin that he hadn't touched since he bought them in early 2016. Steve texted me the situation and I knew what I had to do. I FaceTimed Josh and called in the largest favor of my life, promising him 10% of Steve's haul, guaranteeing him that Steve was playing an unbeatable strategy, and hard vouching for Steve. Most people wouldn't touch such a far-fetched investment for nearly a third of what they were worth. But that's exactly what Josh did when he spent $5,000 on that Bitcoin in 2016. By the prospect theory that guided Steve's suited villain to risk a BMW after losing dozens of sims in a row, Josh felt upstuck from Bitcoin's decline. It was an impulsive decision. The businessman was minutes away from leaving with a cocky smile. Josh was half asleep and flush with adrenaline. He digitally and irreversibly transferred nearly $45,000 worth of crypto. 24 minutes later, it was in Steve's wallet. When Steve's wire request was submitted, the stage was set for the highest stakes press of a button our state had ever witnessed, all in the privacy of a screen and 2 onlookers. It was 4:38 a.m. Our floor men pressed go. At 4:55 a.m., it was all over. Steve had won an additional $26.2K, bringing his total for the session to plus $58,325. My God. Steve couldn't stop talking about the high he felt from that session. Steve talked up every heroic detail to his high school friends, his bar buddies, and to fellow players in our daily tournament. While that kind of money fascinated most players and made for a great story, some people saw it as predatory. The businessman just lost so fast. Something speciously human scares people about having an option to lose lots of money quickly. One man, who shall remain anonymous, wrote a letter to the Florida State Gaming Commission retelling the story as he heard it. Rumors, particularly those relayed by poker players, have an agenda to them. The elderly aren't an ideal group to play telephone with. Through intention or incompetence, the story of Steve's triumph transformed into the following. Steve met a gambler who must have been blind drunk. The gambler couldn't control himself. Only an insane person would keep playing the same game expecting a different result. Our house enabled Steve to swindle the gambler by accepting a form of payment from both players that we never had before. The Gaming Commission must shut us down to protect players from themselves. And that's just what they did. An edict was placed banning all strategically influenced autoplay poker in Florida casinos. This meant that all forms of 50-50 flipping was legal, but any computer-simulated PvP games where the computer played differently for each player was not. In the ordinance, the Florida Gaming Commission explained that such games create an unethical illusion that anyone can win when this isn't true. Certain strategies are better than others. Dominant strategies will win in a large sample. Players must be protected from committing to a style of play that is inferior with no agency to correct their play. There is insufficient information on winning strategies provided by the house, and players aren't able to adjust their decision-making once they buy into a game. Translation: it's fine to lose slow. It's fine to add variance. It's illegal to take the gamble out of gambling. Here are the final stats from our Super Simulator Push-Fold tournament. 6,236 tournaments run over 425 days. 5,299 MTTs, 937 in the Heads Up for Rolls room. $428,650 collected by the house. $595,997 raised for Cool Earth. $683,271 raised for the Against Malaria Foundation. 322 losing players, 19 winning players, 3 men off the record, seeking help for gambling addictions, and 1 solved game. So there you have it. A glorified version of tic-tac-toe destroyed lives. I wish I could tell you that the old folks learned from the experience, that they saw the absurdity in losing at such a simple game, that they'd volunteer or travel for new experiences, or play bridge at retirement homes to keep their less mobile peers company. I'd be lying to you. Derby Lane is just where they go. The era of opportunity for winning players is fading. Lawmakers are owned by casinos, and casinos want their customers to lose slowly. After fuming and trying to fight the corrupt law for weeks, I finally asked myself a tough question I'd never considered before. Why do I believe that poker pros deserve to make a living? It's a zero-sum game. No value is contributed to society by playing poker well. It's likely that the poker boom was merely a fluke, a blip never to be repeated. Am I just bitter about investing so much time into a game no more objectively productive than Stratego? When it comes to brass tacks, people play cards for fun, as an excuse to meet up, as an escape from their stressors. The sooner I accept this, the sooner I'll be able to shift my competitive curiosity into something that benefits society at large. As the years pass and standard poker practices gradually disseminate to the lowest stakes, losing players will begin to recognize their most glaring errors. And unfortunately, the easiest and most obvious amendments to a shoddy strategy improve win rates by the greatest margin. This isn't to say that variations like a 7-deuce royalty or straddles from different positions couldn't shake the game up. Houses could even offer side bets that combine poker with table games. VPIP requirements, conversational requirements and heads-up pots, and inebriation requirements could create edge by taking people out of their comfort zone. Like Ben Solsky said, poker is at its best when it's in constant change, requiring quick reactions and open-minded critical thinking. However, in the long run, particularly as the wealth gap widens and fewer people have disposable income, games stagnate, and low-stakes poker will become unbeatable for a living hourly wage. Strategies homogenize, and when everyone's super, no one is. This story is called Losing Fast and Slow, as a nod to Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, because most players in our game lost instead of thought. While losing in 15 minutes via computer simulation may feel more chaotic and depressing than losing in 4 hours playing live, they're functionally the same. Hopefully, though, there is some joy in the process of losing. If I could help all of the world's worst poker players, I wouldn't give them an Upswing Lab membership or a copy of PioSolver. I would just make sure they never played with critical, rude, or unhygienic players. All but a small percent of poker players lose, whether fast or slow, and the duty of staff, winning players, and losing players is to ensure that the game is enjoyable. Live poker can remain attractive in the face of tougher games if it's rebranded as a lounge to meet new people from all walks of life, rather than a hostile battleground. If I have a regret about what happened at Derby Lane, it's that we disillusioned our players of the magic in poker. In our computer-simulated tournament, nobody made a hero call on the river for a crucial double-up. Nobody picked up a tell that allowed them to bluff their opponent off a pot they had no right to win. Nobody assumed the table personality of the person they wished they were in real life. Poker became a complicated math problem, and being correct was an unattainable standard. Months after our push-full tournament was shut down, I remember dealing to a group celebrating a bachelor party. They were a rowdy bunch of mid-20s guys with varying levels of familiarity to poker. The game was just a platform for them to run all their jokes and bond. Here's a hand history and a soundbite to give you a sense of the game. At 1-2 no limit, under the gun calls. Middle position, who's the groom-to-be, raises to $4. The button 3-bets to $40. Under the gun calls again. Middle position 4-bets to $80. The button calls, and under the gun folds. Middle position says, "Shit, you called? That was supposed to be a Danish value bet." The flop came Queen of Hearts, 10 of Hearts, 9 of Hearts. Middle position leads all in for $103. Button turns over the King of Hearts and the 3 of Diamonds and says, "All right, I got the round 2 flush draw and the virgin straight draw, and you're forcing a Detroit all in." Tell you what, Mason, you promise me you're getting a prenup and I'll put the money in here and now. If I miss, you just might not get that toaster on your registry. The button calls. Middle position shows aces with the Ace of Hearts. The turn's the 5 of Spades, and the river is the Jack of Hearts. The table starts losing its fucking mind. They're singing shanties about what a great lad middle position is, and ribbing him about getting it in with just one pair. The winner buys all of his friends around, and the whole room is captivated by their jubilance. Table transfer requests flood our podium in a tacit, "I'll have what he's having." This was the type of light, exciting, social atmosphere that everyone yearned for. A setting where you forgot about your troubles and made lifelong friendships, not a self-destructive purgatory to silently stew over your last bad call. The future of poker as I see it is that professionals will act as entertainers for recreational players. Card rooms will populate tables with prop players, full of personality to cater to their customers' desires. Houses will charge timed rake so that cheap games don't die off with inflation, and so that players forget how much they're actually in for. Games will cater toward a tight crowd, yet equities will run close to keep the game fair. Limit short deck hold'em would do the trick. Poker will become a service, not a game. No one will have to admit to themselves that they're worse than any of their opponents. Casinos will glamorize the lifestyle of poker mediocrity, and players will gamble away their days with a smile, regardless of how quickly or slowly they lose.